This Saturday there is the world's most heaviest boxing match ever. Eddie Hall is going to box Hafthor Bjornsson in one of the most expected strongman clashes between two people who have a huge beef between them, and they really hate each other. So let's dive into it. Let's see why they do hate each other, why this fight can be super interesting, and how it can end up. We'll analyze both of the guys' improvements, both of the guys' styles, and see who can be victorious at the end of the day, because that's what matters, right? So the beef, who doesn't know? Hafthor Bjornsson and Eddie Hall are two of the biggest faces of strongman competitions since the last 10 years. They've been always at the top, they've been always strong competitors, they both hold several solid records. Eddie Hall was first famous for his 500 kilograms deadlift record, and I also remember, man, when I saw it as a kid, I was like, holy shit, that was amazing. And when I saw also Thor's 501 kilograms deadlift record beating Eddie Hall's record later, I was also, man, that's just like some pure strength and mass right there. So why do these guys really hate each other? Their beef goes all the way to 2017 when Eddie Hall won a strongman competition, and Hafthor felt like he was cheated, like something was not right. So basically Hafthor said that the competition was kind of fixed to make it easy for Eddie Hall, like there was a last minute replacement of one challenge to do something else instead, which benefited Eddie much more, because if it was according to the previous plan, it was something that Eddie was really bad at. And then also Thor got deducted some of the points because of his bad technique during one lift, which could be, it was one of those situations where you can feel cheated, but this kind of thing went and it just took a life of its own. Thor just didn't accept the fact that Eddie Hall won, and he always felt cheated, and maybe there's something to it. Eddie Hall, at the same hand, he also felt like that Thor didn't acknowledge him. It was the biggest win of his career, and he just felt like he tried to take away something from him. So, first of all, to touch on this, I don't want to go into the details because there have been multiple videos about it and a lot of different opinions. But I understand why Thor can feel like that, because anyone who has, who's been watching any sort of sports, there's always something that feels a little bit sketchy, It might not be something that is really, going under the radar, like there are referees fixing the games or something, but you can honestly feel like that, Another point is like, can you really prove it? If you can really prove it and it's a legitimate thing, then yeah, go for it. But if it's just, your personal feelings, then, it should never get too personal in that sense. But at the same time, things like fixing games, fixing sports happened. It happened in a lot of sports. In NBA, there was referees that were caught betting on the games and fixing the games. Even this year's Super Bowl felt like, the referees could have done a much better job. There is only one argument for this. Every competition, every sport benefits better if the face of the sport is someone who is more famous and who brings more money. There is a reason why Lance Armstrong was a face of cycling until he said like, I was doping. Because having some certain people who are much more famous for the sport is better, because then everybody gets richer. That's why there is a lot of weird decisions in the world of boxing or MMA. It's because just some people are better for the sport. It's not correct, it's not right, but sometimes it happens. So I understand why Thor feels like, Eddie Hall, it was kind of made in the Eddie Hall's favor. But then the both guys started just trash talking each other and making videos about each other, and it just took a life of its own, and it just went much more overboard than it should. But they are very competitive, at least, so you cannot blame them, right? So what did the Thor did afterwards? He said like, hey, I'm coming after you and I'll take all your records, all your wins. The very next year, after 2017, Hafthor Bjornsson won the world's strongest man, and he even broke Eddie Hall's record of deadlifting 500 kilograms. And there goes another drama, because this deadlift happened during the pandemic. You know, it wasn't during the competition where usually in order to have a world record that counts, it must happen in a competition and not in just like backyard or your home gym, which that is very valid criticism of from Eddie Hall. And maybe that's why he feels like it wasn't a real record. And it felt also personal for him because Thor is basically coming for his huge record, you know. But at the same time, you have to give benefit of the doubt to Thor because, you know, it was a fucking pandemic, you know. He didn't choose. It was basically the only thing they could do, you know. You know how it was during the pandemic. We could barely travel. Everything was cancelled. You couldn't have the fans. Like, it was just impossible to organize a competition. I believe they chose go with the settings, and it was approved by WUS, which basically oversees strongman records. And also Rogue was the main sponsor. There was referees and everything. But Eddie always keeps saying like, oh, it was in your gym, you know, your dad weighted the plates. But I don't think that, you know, it's one of those things where like it's been approved. It's under a very precarious situation. But then again, it was during the pandemic. So what can you do, you know? Then after Thor beating Eddie Hall's deadlifting record, he called out Eddie Hall for a boxing match. And we had a lot of this boxing matches. There was like, oh, celebrity boxing match. You know, there is Jake Paul fighting, there is Logan Paul fighting, there is Floyd Mayweather doing celebrity boxing matches and all that. But this one is much more amazing, you know, because we have two giants, you know, we have two actual powerful athletes. We have people who were the strongest men in the world. Now it's much more different, you know, being able to punch someone and generate the power and just being overly strong. And that's the interesting and peculiar thing. Everybody's wondering how it's going to translate if you take someone who is absolutely like Herculean strong into a boxing ring, you know? Can they just break someone as they like break pans on the video shows or something, you know? Can they just throw the other boxers out like they do with the keg tosses and everything? So that is the very interesting question because we have two huge athletes coming into the world of boxing. And this is where we can start analyzing both of each guy's attributes. Because let's start with Hafthor Björnsson. Hafthor Björnsson took an attitude like he moved to Scotland, he started training with a professional trainer, he started having sparring matches, then he had some fixed matches, which were obviously ended in a draw in Dubai. But that is alleged experiences. And we've seen that Hafthor took it very seriously and he lost a lot of weight. Because everyone who ever tried boxing knows that it's just a cardio machine. You have to be a cardio machine in order to just be able to make it through several rounds. So Thor is doing it in a very good way. He's preparing, he's developing solid fundamentals, and he's doing things correctly. The best thing is that he had 3 matches. 2 of them were kind of fixed that you could see they were ended in a draw, but they were against some legit fighters in a legit ring. So he had continuous improvements, and that's what's very improvement, you know. It's similar like in NFL when the Colts drafted Peyton Manning. His first year was terrible, but you could see the improvements, like game over game over game. He got better, and better, and that's what's happening with Thor. We've seen he was terrible. He was like some of his punches where he was just like 1-2, just like keep jabbing, then 1-2, but he's doing it much more. He's doing it much better over every match. He is not doing, you know, he's not winding his punches. He's doing straight punches. He has a very good technique, but he has one big problem. He's getting caught by that overhand right. Overhand right is basically the way how you can easily defeat someone who is much taller than you. And even Devon Larratt managed to catch Hafthor Björnsson with that overhand right, even though it was already Hafthor's 3rd match and Devon had only a couple weeks to prepare. So that should not happen. If you already spent so much time in preparing and developing and improving, you know that that overhand right is your biggest problem. You shouldn't care about, you know, body shots because like you're a fucking strong man, your body torso is it's absolutely massive and is stronger. So you should basically just always protect yourself and keep your hands high. And Thor is doing a very good job with it, but he's just getting caught. On the other hand, Eddie Hall didn't have any matches. He said he had some sparring wars or he had some boxing matches, but it was not published. So we can only take his word for it. but we have to judge it based on what we've seen in the footage. And Eddie Hall, in his sparring footage videos, let me remind you, I don't have a fan in this match, but Eddie Hall looks terrible. He's just throwing haymakers left and right, he's just winding his punches. Technique is not really there, his hands are always down. It's something, it's like when you pick up boxing. I remember when the first time when I picked up boxing, I was just like throwing big hands and just trying to destroy the heavy bag, you know. And that seems to me that is Eddie Hall, you know. Even before this match, he was still doing some sort of strongman training, you know. He was deadlifting huge weight while Thor transitioned to the more cardio style training. And Eddie Hall is not doing it. That's why I think that Thor is much bigger favorite in this. However, like, this is this peculiar thing. Eddie Hall is basically just throwing haymakers. And since Thor has much bigger reach, Eddie Hall has to close the distance. And Thor is being caught by that overhead right. So if Eddie Hall is basically just throwing those huge haymakers, and Thor has this weakness that he's being caught, that plays very well in Eddie Hall's favor. However, I believe Thor will prepare for it. And since Eddie Hall didn't have any professional match, and we don't know a lot about sparring footages, we've seen, you know, some small sparring footages, I think he can gas a lot. People say that he's a cardio machine and he swims a lot. Yeah, but like, having a general cardio is good, but boxing is much different, you know. I played basketball for a lot of years, and I also played volleyball for a lot of years. I was very active and fit young man when I picked up boxing first time. And I still remember to this day, after my first sparring session, I was fucking dead. And we just went for 3 rounds. The next time when I went for 6 rounds, it was real half a year of training later, I was still insanely dead. So even though they are both professional athletes, boxing is much different sport, you know. And you can see it also in MMA, you know. When the strikers fight wrestlers, you know, the wrestling cardio is completely different. They can gas up much faster. And similarly, when the wrestlers that try to go striking for 5 rounds, they just gas up, you know. And once that oxygen goes out of your muscles, your strong, solid punches all of a sudden become, you know, like a pillows. And especially if you're just throwing haymakers, you are throwing a lot of energy. So I'm afraid that Eddie Hall can gas up very fast in the first 1 or 2 rounds. And then Thor, if he survives, because he keeps getting hit by that overhand right, if he survives that, I think he can demolish Eddie later on. Because Thor showed us, or at least we've seen on the footage, he has much better cardio, much better, I would say, stamina in the ring, and awareness. What Eddie Hall can do is basically just like wish that he can land one of those haymakers that he's just throwing, and he can just hope to make it a dirty boxing. You know, because at the end of the day, as he said it himself, it's not a boxing, it's a fight. That is true, but the technique matters. But at the same time, it's boxing and anything can happen. I believe that Thor can prepare very well. Because 1-2, the first jab and the right hand is always a great thing if you're a huge monster like Thor. It can keep anyone at bay. However, if Eddie keeps closing the distance, if we haven't seen it from a lot from Thor, but if he just perfects a little bit that left check hook, that can just destroy Eddie Hall's night. Because we've seen when he's always closing distance, he doesn't have his hands up. And when you're throwing headmakers like this, you just get caught with that left check hook and it's over. You just keep getting caught and caught and caught and caught. Especially if Eddie Hall has his hands down all the time, and if you're going against a taller opponent, he would just be like bonking you on your head and it's over. So this fight is very intriguing. It's going to be streamed for free. You can watch it tomorrow on Saturday. Let me know, guys, what you think. I honestly believe that Eddie Hall has a chance of catching Thor with one of those overhand rights in the first or 2 rounds, and it can add quickly. If that don't happen, I think Thor will dominate Eddie for the rest of the fight. So let me know what you guys think, and I will see you in the next one.